You're listening to the Live the Creed podcast, dedicated to getting you home alive.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Live the Creed podcast. This is episode 31. I'm Josh. I'm here with John. And we've got a pretty special guest on with us today. It's our friend Sam.
You might know him as PrepMedic on YouTube and Instagram. He's got quite a following there, reaching over, I think you just crossed the 260,000 mark on YouTube.
261.
Wow, that is amazing since you just crossed the 100,000 last year, right?
Correct, yeah.
That's some serious growth.
Got to hit that like algorithm stride, you know?
Yep. Nailed it.
Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Sam, if you just want to introduce yourself real quick and kind of your certifications and what you do right now, that way people who aren't familiar will be able to know who you are.
For sure. So, like you said, my name's Sam. I'm on YouTube, but my full-time job, I'm a critical care flight medic up in northern Colorado. Fly with Lifeline on a rescue helicopter, and then I'm also part of a special operations response team in the northern Colorado region, which attaches basically medics to 2 SWAT teams in the area, search and rescue, and then dive rescue and swiftwater rescue. So we do kind of run the gamut there. Of course, part-time, I'm still on the ground, can't give that up just yet, but every time I pick up a shift, it's becoming less and less likely I'm going to do it again.
I can sympathize with that, man. I've been out of the ambulance for a little over a year now. And every time I think I miss it, I'll go back home and visit all my friends and hear about all the BS they're going through. I'm like, I guess I don't miss it all that much. I think you start to miss the idea of it more than you actually miss, sitting in the box all day long. And then the other side of it is you miss the fun stuff, but it's all the mundane things that you tend to forget about. That's all you think about when you're working.
I miss the people. I don't miss the fecal matter and the clientele that you see on an inner city ambulance.
Yeah. Scabies. Lice. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
I can do without that in my life. Nice. So how long has it been that you've been in flight?
So I've only been in flight for about a year. I actually think I hit my year like today or tomorrow or something like that with them.
Okay, nice.
Definitely feels like it was a lot longer ago and a lot sooner, all at the same time, still getting my feet under me. But I've been a paramedic for, about 10 years now.
Okay.
And an EMT for a year or two before that. So baby face aside, I've been doing it for a little while at least.
Yeah. How old were you when you went through EMT?
18.
Oh, okay. So you basically got at it right away.
Yeah. Yep. Went to EMT and then gave it like 6 months, went through fire academy, and then went through paramedic right kind of all at once. So I was a paramedic when I was like just turning 20.
Dang. So wow. I used to work with this captain, and he'd always brag, be like, I was pushing narcs before I could drink a beer. We always gave him so much crap for it. But you're one of those guys, so okay.
Don't let that stop you.
Yeah, right?
Who needs a beer?
That's funny. Nice, man. That's cool. And so ground ambulance, I'm assuming, for probably the majority of it.
Well, let's take it back. So at 18, how did you decide that you wanted to get into this field? Because it's pretty rare, I think, these days.
For the glory and the money, man.
For the and the fecal matter.
The money. Yeah, so, I was one of those kids that in school I didn't do well in anything unless I cared about it. I wasn't somebody that could sit down, take a math class, do like good in it just because they said I had to. So I was looking for something that was academically challenging because through some other endeavors, I kind of knew that I was able to succeed in those realms, but that still applied, that would have a life skill outside of work, not just something that I was doing it, at work and then I came home and it was completely irrelevant. So I wanted kind of a life skill from whatever job I decided to do. I joined ski patrol, which was awesome. It was just a small volunteer ski patrol, but you still see some traumatic injuries and you get a lot of like orthopedic injuries and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, it's broken wrists, broken clavicles all day long, every day. But that's where I met a couple of my mentors, people that kind of firefighter paramedics that worked there just for fun. That kind of got me into it, that made me see it was potentially a career, and I really liked doing it. So I was like, well, heck, why not? May as well take an EMT class, and then may as well, go to fire academy, may as well do paramedic. And before you know it, I'm 10 years in.
Wow. So that kind of set you on the path forward. You got your foot in with ski patrol. And where was that at? Was that in Colorado where you are now, or?
Oh, don't I wish it was in Colorado? No, it was on the ice slopes of the Midwest at Tyrol Basin by Madison, Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
They ski out there?
I was going to say, I didn't know there were ski resorts.
Skate.
Yeah, okay.
Skate down the hill. But yeah, through that, I did a firefighter paramedic internship. So it was a live-in program where you live in the fire station for 3 years. They pay for your EMT, paramedic.
Okay.
They give you a stipend. You work full-time, and then they'll do your Fire 1, Fire 2. And they would have done my associate's degree, but I pieced out before that.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually a pretty interesting program. I've never heard of something like that.
Yeah, there's a handful of them around. It's great experience. I mean, I'm sure as you've noticed, or you've probably come to realize, as you cycle through people who are coming in and going out of the field, the people who go from EMT to medic who don't have a ton of experience previous to going into medic school tend to struggle a little bit more. And so being able to live in during that process, I'm sure was definitely a massive advantage for you.
Yeah, and learn from career firefighters. You don't make all we call them farkles out here. Or in Madison, we call them farkles. I don't know, everywhere has a different, like Rescue Randy and stuff. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of having the tool belt, but, kind of how you act and stuff. So learning from career firefighter paramedics, you kind of know what you can do and what you can't do.
Yeah.
It gets you over that awkward teenage hump.
Yeah, be the guy who walks in with his, like, rescue fanny pack.
I resemble that remark.
I mean, you probably go through, it's a phase, right? You think it's super cool because, like, you're going through EMT school and you have to carry it around. And then you realize it's like the dorkiest thing on the planet. And then you realize you don't want to shove things in your pockets. And so it's highly convenient to have something. You don't really care what people think about you.
So you go back to it.
Yeah. It's like going, it's like the whole dad bod thing, like eventually you're just going to end up wearing jean shorts and New Balances.
You're just going to end up there.
Yep.
And you're going to be there soon, right? Is what I'm hearing.
Oh gosh, yeah. I've got a month before mine's born, my first one. So
that's awesome.
And
Congrats.
Of course, I took this time to go, and I'm leaving on Friday for a 2-week elk hunt in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area.
Yes,
I'm sure your wife is very happy with you right now.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, I did that. Let's see, my firstborn was in September, and I took off a month later for a 2-week elk trip in Montrose. So.
Oh,
yeah.
After your firstborn was born?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And Sam,
she's very gracious.
Are you you know what you're having?
Yes, we're having a boy.
You're having a boy. Well,
nice.
Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's super cool.
That'll be a game changer, but
that's what everybody keeps telling me. I've got my head in the sand. I don't quite believe it's real yet.
I don't think that there's any level of like words or directional like that we could give you to help you through what's about to happen. It's a process.
Sleep and bourbon. Those are
bourbon for the baby, sleep for me.
There you go.
Nice, man. That's awesome.
No.
So how did the whole YouTube thing come about?
Yeah, so I mean, like you said, going into like EMS right out of high school, I feel like it's not very common. I think there was like 2 of us in our graduating class of like 600 in high school that went into EMS or fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's public, going into public safety just is not a popular choice right now. So I went into it. I was working in central Iowa as a paramedic, and we had awesome protocols. It was a great place to work. And we got back from this like grain silo entrapment, intubate, like RSI in the field, so like paralyzing somebody, putting a breathing tube down, doing anesthesia, and like managing this patient for like multiple hours. It was just really cool. Like, it was a really cool call. It was like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe they're trusting me to do this.
Yeah.
And we got back and we had job openings for like 2 paramedic slots, and we had 2 applicants, and both of them had like extensive criminal histories, and there was no way we were going to employ them.
Right.
And it was like one of those like, hey, people say it's not a high paying job and you're not going to make it rich, but if you find the right place to work, you can make some money. And
for sure. You can at least make a decent living.
Exactly. You're a public servant. You're going to make, if you're at a good service, anywhere between 40 and 100. And, I think that's a living most places, unless it's like LA or New York City or something.
It's okay. Fire medics out there are making like 170. So
It hurt my feelings, why don't you?
I don't know if that's true. I'm sure if we have any like LAFD guys, they're like, no, we don't.
Yeah,
That's
drop
ridiculous.
us a line. We're talking some
We've
bull.
got South Metro here in Denver. They start for a bachelor degree, firefighter, paramedic. You start 120.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of the departments that were around the area that I was working in was about the same. Like you'd start anywhere from 95 to 115 was kind of the range.
Yeah.
And that's base. All the, you can get sucked into the whole overtime.
Yeah.
gambit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm told that gets easier with kids.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, it was one of those like, hey, why don't we have applicants? And you go online and there's just nobody representing EMS. You've got some firefighters out there. You've got a lot of nurses and you got a lot of cops, but you don't have anybody in EMS that's talking good. You got salty meme pages.
Yep.
That like to just rag on everything. And it's funny. I follow them, but there comes a point where it's too much.
Right.
It comes a point where it's not professional, and we have to, kind of rise above that. So,
Sure.
Decided to start a YouTube channel. We had a Lucas 3 device, which is a compression machine. I got it out of its case, went upstairs, and filmed my first video. And then from there, just kind of uploaded every week, and by some miracle, got followers.
Wow. That's pretty awesome to actually hear the story of it and kind of just the idea behind it, that there was a lack of information basically, and you saw that was leading to a lack of people wanting to get into the field. It's awesome.
I think it's true. I before I enlisted, I like dove headfirst into trying to figure out everything I could about the Marines. I wanted to know who, what, when, all the questions. Who do I look up to? What do I look out for? What can I expect? All that kind of stuff. And I do remember doing that some with medic school. But I think it was more like you just reach out to people, because you're right. There's just not a lot online that sheds light on the career field in general, and beyond the career field, the education process, because it is rather extensive. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort. It's a relatively large financial commitment, and people want to have some level of confidence knowing what to expect going into it. And those resources really aren't there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, having that, I found it was kind of cool the other day. My ground service is expanding rapidly. They just grabbed another contract, and we're hiring, I think, 150 paramedics and EMTs over the next 6 months.
Is it a private service serving a public system?
So kind of. We're a hospital-based service.
Oh, okay.
And the hospital system we work for is not for profit.
Okay.
So we are technically private, but it's not the same atmosphere as your AMRs and stuff like that, and they pay pretty well.
Nice.
But I told the chief that was in charge of it, I was like, hey, I think a number of these people are here because of me, and she's like, there's no way. There's no way. So she got up in front of this academy of 28 paramedics and was like, hey, who's here because you talked to Sam on Instagram? And about half the room raised their hand. So
Nice.
If that doesn't show that it's helped and is working, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
No, that's proof in the pudding right there. I mean, and like you said, if you have the platform now to be able to actually help people fill vacancies, around the country, really, if you let it be known.
Yeah.
I need to get them to pay me for it now.
That is that smart move.
Monetizing something you do well. It's, great to talk about, harder to execute on.
Right.
So are you guys primary for the 911 system as well?
Yeah, so we run 911 for the entirety of the city of Fort Collins, which is about 200,000 people.
Nice.
We run basically to the Wyoming border, so Wellington and a lot of those places, and then to the Continental Divide, which is about a 3-hour drive into the mountains west. And we just took over the Greeley contract, which is another 100,000 people, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
So I work for the same system. I'm just on their helicopter. We've got 3
cool.
helicopters, soon to be 5, plus a fixed wing, and 3 ground critical care trucks.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have. Is Fort Collins been booming? I've lived there one summer many years ago.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, Denver and that whole area is just, tons of people have poured in there over the past 10 years and obviously expanded the need for service quite a bit.
Yeah, my wife was born and raised in Fort Collins, and I think the population since she was a kid has doubled in that city alone. And it's just so pretty. Everybody wants to move out here. You've got the weed tourism is huge.
Yeah.
Now that other states are starting to legalize weed, it's not as big of an issue, but you had a lot of people right at first move out to Colorado just so they could smoke.
Sure.
Weed tourism. It's like wine country, but weed country. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
It makes perfect sense. It's just hilarious. I never would have
thought about it like that.
No,
yeah, Sam's right, because we were living in Colorado when it got legalized, and so was Chris in Denver, and it was like, he was like, yeah, like all my, like just tons of people are messaging me like, should I come to Colorado?
Sure.
He's like, I don't know. Do you want to smoke weed? Like,
that's pretty funny.
Yep.
Wow. All right. Well, that's cool. I'm intrigued by the system that's all wrapped up into one. So I was with AMR, and I was just in a public contract, and my situation was a little bit unique. I was one of just a small handful of shops that were non-union. So we didn't deal with a lot of the other, big company drama that a lot of others deal with. Which was nice. And I say wine country. I worked in Napa County for pretty much the entirety of my career. And the tourism out there is pretty hysterical. You got the Napa Valley Special, unconscious person at a winery every 15 minutes all summer long.
That's the call.
That's pretty funny. Nice. So walk me through the transition to flight. I mean, I know that there's some expanded scope. You've got to go through some extra courses. There's some licensures that you have to go through. Some you can do after you get your hire, others you do before, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so we're a little unique. They require your FPC, I think is what you're talking about, your flight paramedic certification.
Yeah.
CAMES requires that after 2 years. Our service just says, hey, you need it when you walk in the door. So
okay.
I basically started the prep for it for a while ago.
Yeah.
And it was intense. So I had to go through a critical care course through like Creighton, which is, the ins and outs, the things that you don't see, invasive monitoring, ECMOs, balloon pump, Impellas, all of that stuff, and kind of advanced pharmacology. And then had to study for my FPC, which is a board cert that's pretty high failure rate amongst paramedics. I think it's got like a 70% first time fail rate.
Wow.
So of course I didn't give myself any leeway, and I took it the day before I interviewed for the job. So, wasn't any chance to retake it. So
high pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And I knew people, and that's really what got me in the door. I think every time we have an opening, we get, 50 to 100 applicants for one flight position. So it's very, very competitive, but being within our same thing, I had a good name for myself within my agency, and that really helped keep that door open.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so that transition, and I know you've been on a few different specialty teams in the past, SWAT medic, right? Obviously, I know you do the SAR stuff as well with your current team. But like those specialty teams, I think that they really expand your scope in the things that in your knowledge, and kind of have those teams helped you keep it fresh and expand your career, because a lot of people don't make it 10 years in EMS without getting burnt out.
Yeah, they've helped me through that, and kind of always growing and having somewhere to grow. I feel like a lot of people get in EMS and they realize whatever agency they're with, it's like you look at that one old guy in your agency and you're like, he's been a paramedic for 45 years and only a paramedic. And some people can do that. I like having a place to grow and to learn and to improve upon. So that's helped. The specialty teams, our scope wasn't actually any different technically, but kind of anything goes when you're in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. Not saying I blatantly violate protocol or anything like that for those employers that may or may not be listening to this.
Guidelines for decision making.
Exactly. But when you don't have any cell service, you can't call med control for something, something's the right thing to do, you can justify it, like you can kind of do what you need to do. And SWAT guys are very much like, hey, I'm not going to sue you and I think this is how we should handle this. Like, and you kind of do what you have to do for them in the moment.
I really don't want to die, so
Do what you need to do.
yeah.
Exactly. So I did find that helped, and then just because it's a small team, you get to know people better.
Yeah.
You're more in tune with the community. You know, you show up on a normal ground call, and you got cops there that you work with on the specialty team, and they know you. You got a better rapport. You know, search and rescues. You know, I've been on the truck, and technically we're not deployable if we're on the street. They have to keep us there. But with that, you know, they'll have you do things that you wouldn't normally do in those situations. So I found it really helped. But really, at the end of the day, nothing helped. I got into flights, and I was so over my head with everything. You know, you have to learn the aviation side.
Mm-hmm.
Learning about a balloon pump, not a balloon pump, learning about an Impella and actually doing an Impella call are two very, very different things. And when you work with nurses that are really good at this critical care stuff, you know, they'll kick your ass until you know how to do it.
Do you fly RN medic?
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah,
was
we
going to
fly
ask.
RN medic.
Okay. And how many flights, like, a week are you doing, or is it, like, multiple daily?
Yeah, so we do multiple in a day. I think we've been riding the last like 3 months in a row. We've been 60 to 70 flights a month.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a
We're
lot.
pretty high call volume.
And you mentioned that you guys are a rescue bird as well.
No, not we. So we still do scene calls.
Oh, okay.
And we do that. And what we end up doing a lot for rescues is we'll do like lift tickets for SAR. We had one the other week where they were like, hey, we just need somebody to insert us. And that was one where being part of the special teams helps because they had a hunter with chest pain way back in the mountains. And you guys will appreciate the clinical presentation. His exact words to dispatch were, yeah, I felt really nauseous. I started to sweat. And then I laid down, and it was like this pressure in my left arm going up into my jaw. I was like, well, I don't even need a 12 lead to tell you what's going on with you. So they we got inserted by our helicopter like a mile away from him and then hiked in, stuff like that. We end up doing a lot. We're not hoisting.
Oh, you
Gosh,
don't have a hoist.
I wish we were hoisting.
Yeah, we worked with so in California we have CHP, and they're our most readily available rescue resource for air, and they worked in a lot of different capacities. Sometimes they have medics on their birds, so it's nice when they're first on scene. They'll just pick them up and take off. A lot of times they'll pick a patient up, drop them off to the ambulance, or vice versa, take people out. So there's a lot of different capacities in which it's used, which is nice. So
Sure.
We ended for that particular call. Weather came in and got our bird off the mountain, unfortunately. So we sat with the STEMI for like 3.5 hours, I think.
no kidding. They ever code on you?
No.
Really?
I was amazed. That didn't happen. He's actually doing fine.
Really?
Doing just fine. We ended up getting a Black Hawk from the Air National Guard because those guys have no rules on what they fly in. They're like, look at the sky. They're like, yeah, I think I can make it.
We'll give it a go.
They took us off. Yeah, exactly. They took us off the mountain in a Black Hawk, which was kind of cool.
That's cool.
That is pretty cool.
That and the Coast Guard.
I bet the SAR guys were like huge grins on their faces.
They were mad because they don't always have a medic with them, and they were like, we can take 2. I'm like, well, obviously I'm going. And
they got left behind.
Go. And then they were stuck at the top of this mountain with a 1-wheel and a Stokes basket and all of their rescue gear that they had to hike down that mountain.
Brutal.
Okay, yep, they were pissed. I'm just like the one time that I was part of Idaho Search and Rescue a year ago, and I remember they got a call up in the mountains like a few hours from here, and the National Guard was like, we'll take you guys up there. I think it was on the 4th of July. Like, they flew up, they got inserted. They had to take a boat across a lake. Like, they were all super ops, going in.
That's awesome.
But yeah, they came back with just, huge smiles on their faces. Like, great operation. Got to do all the fun stuff.
Yeah, it was fun to get to do those less common scenarios and whatnot. That's cool. I like prolonged care. It's fun. We in the county I worked in, we had a lot of BLM land. We had a big lake that was pretty populated, just recreation on one side, and then very rural once you get around the backside. And it was always a lot of fun to get way back in there, find, hunters and lost
Right.
hikers and, broken ankles.
Big difference in how you have to care for that patient. And
Yeah, I mean, and it obviously depends on the severity of what's going on, like when you've got a full-blown STEMI and like that, it's like your pucker factor goes up a little bit, because you just don't know what kind of turn that patient's going to take.
Sure.
And obviously, like, you're prepared to intervene however it goes, and it is what it is. I mean, the call's going to go how the call's going to go. But it is fun being able to provide prolonged care because you get to see a lot of times as medics, especially in the ground side, you'll care for a patient and you'll begin your interventions. And then by the time you're even able to start to see those interventions take any effect, you're at the hospital and ready to transfer care. And so it's not super often, unless you're talking about, like diabetic calls, that we actually get to see the positive benefits of what our care is able to do. So it's kind of cool.
Diabetics and anaphylaxis.
And anaphylaxis, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
So how is, for you, is that like flight calls versus like being in an ambulance? Are those typically shorter than when you were on the box because of the flight time being shorter, or is that longer care or is it shorter?
It really depends. Some of our mountain scene calls can be really, really quick, and they'd be shorter than if you were going up in the mountains via an ambulance. The other side of that, we also do our critical care transfers. So it'll be, an rural ER that has this crashing COVID patient is the scenario right now. And you fly out there and it takes you, like I was on scene with a patient for 2.5 hours, I think the other day, just stabilizing, getting all the drips moved over, starting new drips, transducing the A-lines and all of that. So like those ones take a long time. And there are some where we've got an 8-hour turnaround on them. So it really depends on the situation, but they can be a lot longer and a lot more draining. Having that, we're in an A-star, so that's a really small airframe.
That was kind of my next question, was like the environment that you're working in, like, yeah, that's super hard.
It's really cool, but it's just a vehicle, and it's a hot vehicle without air conditioning. It's a vehicle that makes you a lot more sick than in an ambulance, and you don't have much space to work. So it's cool until it's really not cool.
What's the orientation? You have like one at the patient's head and then one on the side, or yeah?
We're both. So left seat sits, you're straddling the patient's head pretty much, and their feet are towards the front of the cockpit.
Okay.
To the patient's right, like by their feet, is the pilot. And then to my right, if I'm sitting left seat, you've got the right seat, and they really aren't in reach of the patient at all. They're just there to titrate the monitor, change the vent settings, and chart for me.
So I've always been curious. I'll do like ground intercepts for flight crews and whatnot, or had, but you don't really ever get a full picture of what you guys do. How does that relationship with the flight medic and the nurse go? Is it nurse's call? Do you guys have basically equal scope after you've gone through all of your expanded scope training? What's that relationship like?
It's different everywhere you go. For us, we alternate calls. So you'll take a call, then the nurse will take a call, then you'll take a call. And it doesn't matter what it is if that's a scene call, IFT. So we're expected to share the same knowledge base. And on paper, the nurse does have a higher scope in the state of Colorado. Other states aren't like that, like Texas, North Carolina, things like that.
Yeah, Texas is pretty progressive.
They are. So with that, they technically can do a couple things. Like technically in the state of Colorado, paramedics can't hang blood without a waiver. Even with it, we can monitor it, you can't hang it. So every time it's charted, the nurse hung the blood.
Got it. Do you carry whole blood?
We carry, no, we don't. We carry a unit of liquid plasma, which is the equivalent of 2 units of FFP, and then we carry 2 units of PRBC.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
so
awesome.
It changes. We're basically equal partners on the helicopter, minus pay.
Yeah, right. I know, it makes getting that RN like a little bit enticing, a little bit.
Do we lose a little connection there?
Can you see?
Oh,
Can you
we're
hear me?
good. We're back.
Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just glitched out. It's Zoom.
It's Zoom. What can you do? All right, I had a question for you because most people in EMS don't have YouTube channels with 260,000 people following them. So how has that been? Like, do you get any like backlash or ridicule inside of the community, or like what is that like, kind of being a public facing person and then having people around you?
Man, it's almost like you've worked in EMS before. Yeah, so you get like anytime you post anything on any social media platform and you have coworkers that follow you, you're going to get a lot of crap for it. And I enjoy that. In my last service, I got so much crap because I didn't even have followers. They were just like, I'd do a video and 3 people would watch it. They're like, what are you doing? You're such an idiot. Like, this is cringy. So I do get a lot of crap for that, but ultimately it's in good fun.
Yeah.
What's been happening recently that's been really weird for me is you go to an EMS break room and some crews and they're like, oh, hey, are you PrepMedic? Yeah, hey, can I take a picture with you? And that gets me wrecked when I get back to the helicopter or base or something. So, it's like, cool.
No.
But,
Celebrity in the building.
The masks are kind of nice. You keep it on. But, you know, when you really want that energy drink they've got at the break room, you have to take it off. So.
And then they all recognize you. Yeah.
Or it's like the doc, they're like, hey, selfie.
I got a selfie with PrepMedic.
There was a neurosurgeon at Children's down here, and apparently one of my crews flew down, and for like this trauma, and he like pulled the crew member aside. He was like, hey, do you know Sam? Do you work with Sam? And I've talked with him on Instagram. I didn't make a connection at the front, but yeah, I came in the next day and I had my picture all plastered up around the break room and everything. So
nice.
Thick skin is important in EMS.
Nice.
Yeah, I can see that. I was curious because like from a gear perspective, and obviously you're kind of into gear. A little bit. Yeah. What's the funnest like specialty team from a gear perspective? I think I would imagine the SAR like backcountry stuff is kind of the most gear intensive and like interesting to set up different loadouts. What do you think?
So SAR is what I struggle with the most for gear because our formalized training for search and rescue is minimal. Mm-hmm. So like trying to figure out rig a medical pack that has what you need and isn't so cumbersome that you're hiking in the kitchen sink 5 miles for a sprained ankle.
Yeah.
It is tough. I'm getting into it and I really like it, although there's no resources on it. My kind of biggest background is more in SWAT medicine. So kind of just setting up your vest, setting up your teammates' vests and stuff. That's kind of where I've been. Like that's my comfort wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And starting to break out of that a little bit more with the backcountry stuff for sure. But I'm not there yet. I am not an expert in that.
Sure. Yeah, I think the backcountry stuff is a balancing act.
And we deal with that with hunters too.
Same with
like. We're always having people ask like, well, what's the right thing? What should we be taking? What shouldn't we be taking? What's necessary? What's not? And, it kind of changes. If you're going to go in for a day hike, like take less. If you're going to go in for 2 weeks, take more. Like, it's.
Yeah, but there's a lot of variables to that.
There's a lot of variables.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, like people will be like, oh, should I take like a, decompression? No. No, you shouldn't.
Probably not.
I actually watched your guys' video on Jonathan. I think it was your SAR pack.
Yeah.
That you had. I watched that when I was like prepping my pack. I was like, I have no idea, and you type it in, and your video is like one of the first one that pops up.
Oh, nice.
That's right. I remember you asking me some questions on it, and I was like, I'm not like a backcountry medic though. I'm just a part of the SAR team. So I like a pretty general loadout, but yeah, all that survival backcountry stuff is it's pretty fun to be able to play around with.
It is fun. I mean, I feel like I get that way with hunting. Like I get as much into the gear. I'm like, oh, I like this or that, or what's this slight advantage with this piece of gear over the other, with hunting and backcountry and survival and like all that kind of stuff. I think it's as much as a rabbit hole as the tactical stuff. Because I mean, you can do the same. You could change out your mag pouches and belt and holster and this and that and thigh rig and
Yeah.
what vest and what plates and blah blah blah, and like you can just rabbit hole with that. And it's the exact same with the backcountry stuff.
Yep.
You know?
Absolutely. So for kind of our non-EMS listeners, I was going to ask you some questions like regarding like what are kind of some of the most common calls you're getting out into, like, let's say the backcountry for hunters, for hunter safety. Like what are kind of some of the common injuries that guys are getting called out on, and maybe some tips on what people should bring or be prepared to be able to deal with those things until you get help.
Yeah, I think the most common is lost and cold. Somebody goes in and they don't know how to navigate it. They didn't plan out that trail well. They're just not familiar with the backcountry and layering and how fast the weather can change. So by far the most common thing we see is somebody gets lost for a couple hours and then the sun sets and now they're cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going well. They can't find their way out, and it's usually pretty simple. So I think for that, it's, layer accordingly.
Sure.
Have one layer more than you think you'll actually need, and you're.
And are those usually like day hikers?
Yeah, usually
who don't
day
necessarily
hikers.
Yeah, who don't really bring a lot in. They're going in with like a water bottle and
carrying the Nalgene bottle and walking
That's
in
it.
5 miles and So like that's common. And then as far as injuries go, I think it's mainly like arm and leg injuries. And I think
Sprains, wrists.
yeah, exactly. Like they tripped on the trail, they fell down, they had a pack on, it broke their wrist, or they twisted their ankle, possibly broke it, something like that. And besides just having good footwear and something that's going to support you, I like hiking with shoes, but if you're a little bit heavier or if you're not like comfortable with that, having something to support your ankles, it's not like those people that break their ankle are going to hike themselves out realistically. So I don't think there's much you can say like, oh, you can bring this and then you can mitigate this completely, because I just don't think it's going to happen.
Sure. And being like the surrounding mountains around Denver, like, are they able to call that in with like a cell phone, or a lot of people that who are able to get in touch with you guys, is that coming in through like a Garmin InReach or something like that?
We've had a couple with the InReach, which is awesome. Like if you have one of those things are slick. But most of the time it's you can't get cell service anywhere in the Rockies. So usually it's somebody, they're either hiking with somebody and they run out to get help at the trailhead, or another party comes across them and somebody goes out. So there's usually a pretty big gap between the point of injury and when somebody is actually dispatched.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Yep. Well, what's kind of the future for you and PrepMedic as a channel? You still have a lot of like going to stay in the gear and medical, tutorial type space, or is there anything we should be on the lookout for? I know I've seen you drop a few specialty PrepMedic products, which have been pretty cool. Yeah.
So for me, I've kind of been laying low on stuff. I'm kind of keeping on the path of medical gear, that aspect of preparedness and insights into EMS, and I don't really plan to change that anytime soon.
No daily vlog coming.
No daily vlog coming. I can barely get one video out a week as it stands.
Yep.
But right now, kind of holding that line. I'm hoping to get into some more gear creation aspect. Optimize some things that I feel are lacking in this space. And I've got the knife that my buddy sells and makes, which is, I think it's pretty cool. And
who makes that?
Dagger and Knot. He's a local guy up in Fort Collins, and he owned a restaurant in Fort Collins that went belly up when COVID hit, like so many others. And he had been making knives for like 4 years and was like, well, may as well see if I can actually do this professionally. Now is the best time as ever. So he started making them, and he's a cool guy and makes a really cool product.
Nice.
Very cool.
But from that, just keep on keeping on.
Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, you're about a year into flight, so it's not like that's, you've got some time to hit that point where you're a seasoned vet on the flight side. So
I still feel gross every time I walk into work. I walk in and it's like that nervous energy you had when you were first in EMT, and you're like,
oh yeah,
I don't know anything.
Oh yeah.
And people like be like, oh yeah, this drug does this, this, and this, and like my fellow medics will be like talking about these things. I'm like, I don't know what that is.
I remember, like, honestly, I would dream about fictitious calls and then like wake up like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to treat that. And I'd like, my wife would be like elbowing me because I'd be on my phone scrolling through protocols. Like, if this happens, I'm going to lose my job and this person's going to die. And, like, it was just constant. It was like that for a while until you start to like, do a few of these calls that are really scary. And then kind of, it'll be a little bit just marginally less scary the next time. And I don't know. You like, I don't want to say like you lose that edge, but like you just become comfortable. You become comfortable being uncomfortable, I guess is probably the best way to say it. Like you always have a respect for what those calls bring and what they are and how to treat them and whatnot. But I don't know. There is an element, or there's a point where you go from being fearful to just being competent, I guess. Probably.
Yeah,
the best
it's
way,
that Dunning-Kruger's. It's that, the whatever you think you know a lot and you don't.
Oh right, yeah.
And then it's like the slope of despair, and then the like climb to enlightenment.
Yeah.
I'm like right at the bottom of that climb to enlightenment. I felt like I don't know anything and ran a couple crappy calls, and I'm feeling a little bit more confident. So
yeah,
I'm told at about 3 years in flights is where you start feeling a little bit comfortable.
You
so
kind of
we'll
hit
a little
your
bit
stride
comfortable.
bit. Yeah. Well, I mean, like you're dealing, especially with like high acuity transfers. You're just dealing with a different level of patient.
Yeah.
On top of that, with established interventions that are just outside of what we do on the ground side. I mean, it's just not things that you're dealing with. So, I don't know. I think it's cool, and I do like. There's a handful of states that are more progressive. Texas, I think Washington, New York's pretty progressive. Like, so it's kind of cool. Like I've had conversations with medics from those states, and they just even on the field side, there's a lot more that they can kind of pull out of the tool bag.
Yeah.
Than I would say the average state in the U.S. And it's such an odd, the whole like scoping system in the U.S. is just such a cluster. You just never know.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And we have like waivers. So like if you, as a paramedic in the state of Colorado, if you want to RSI, you have to get a waiver, which means you have to get this special thing written by your medical director. You have to demonstrate a certain amount of training in that specific procedure. And then every time you do it in your service, that has to be reported directly to the state. And then every year, the medical director has to go to a state board, sit down, and they're like, hey, on this date, this medic did this, and they have to defend it. And then they go through every time you did it. So
I'm sure they're
is,
super disinclined to actually sign waivers.
Ours do. Like in flights, we have a waiver for almost everything. So like we've got a pretty good scope. We've got iStats for labs. We've got our ventilators, our RSI, our finger thoracostomies, our chest tubes, like all of that is there. But yeah, for ground, a lot of medical directors are like, no, you can't RSI.
Yeah.
And like ketamine, like that's the big hot topic right now. So ketamine was a waiver, and now it's outlawed in the state of Colorado for paramedics to give that.
That's right. I saw you were getting
Worked
had
up.
some work. Yeah, about that. Yeah, what happened there?
Yeah, so there was a really tragic circumstance down in Aurora, 2 years ago now, I want to say, maybe a little bit longer, where a gentleman was detained by police, and like I don't know the whole story there, but there's some questionable, was it right to actually detain him? Did they have the right to stop him and all of that? And the medics got on scene and they gave him a gross overdose of ketamine. There's some questions about the hemodynamic monitoring afterwards, and he tragically died after that administration. Now,
Gotcha.
And that raised the whole like, well, is excited delirium real? Is it not real? I mean, I think it's real. I feel like I've seen it a number of times, in these hypermetabolic states and stuff. But
Can you explain what that is? Excited delirium for just the average listener.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're in California. I'm sure you've seen a number of them.
Definitely real.
It's basically a state where somebody gets severely agitated. They're not themselves at all. There's no reasoning with them. They get this superhuman strength, and they get this basically this hypermetabolic process where they're using O2 a lot faster. They're producing a lot of lactic acid. They're becoming really hyperkalemic, so they've got a lot of potassium in their bloodstream. and that eventually will cause this cascade that will cause the heart to stop.
Okay.
And it's one of those things that we trained a lot of officers in it early on of like, hey, this person isn't just being a douchebag. They're having a medical emergency, and the answer is not tasing them 50 times. The answer is to call an ambulance. So,
and let them medically sedate them.
yeah, and let sedate them. Now, the false conclusion that's been drawn here, in my opinion, is that ketamine caused the deaths because you have all of these cases where ketamine was given and the patient died. What we know about excited delirium is that people die. It's a high death rate thing, even with sedation. And just because the ketamine was given in it doesn't mean that that was actually causing the deaths. But it was the low-hanging fruit. It's what the activists went after. And excited delirium is no longer a recognized term in the state of Colorado for medical providers. And we are not allowed to provide ketamine in those states, despite the fact that it is very hemodynamically stable, has an onset of about 3 to 5 minutes. Whereas the next closest thing, what we're using now, is midazolam. We're going back to B52s, so we're using like Ativan, Haldol, and Benadryl in one syringe, which takes about 15 minutes.
So what? Just out of curiosity, then, so do you have chemical restraint protocols for like what's the barrier to entry to hit your chemical restraint protocol? Because it was very like in my experience, it was very much paramedic discretion. And like I worked with a good handful of police officers that once they realized that we had that ability, calls went a lot easier because they just back off, give the person some space, call medical, and move in, physically restrained, chemically restrained, and we were just using Versed. So, it was a relatively immediate sedation. So,
yeah. So with that, the way it was worded was very much in line of if the patient is going to physically harm you or harm themselves or harm people around them, you move to ketamine, and we're calling it this excited state. If the patient is passively resistive, not able to make their own decisions, lacking that decision-making capacity, and like resisting the seatbelts, trying to get off the cot, like things like that, but not aiming punches and not trying to eat your face, then we'd go to like Versed or something a little bit more milder, but that have much longer onsets of action. So that was kind of the direction, and now it's really strict on what we're calling certain things. The scary part of this is, and the reason why paramedics are really good at kind of being creative in their protocol and hey, I'm going to document this as not lying, but hey, this isn't excited delirium. It's a hyperthermic reaction, something like that. But I will not be doing that in this case whatsoever. That's not something that can be done here just because they actually charged those 2 paramedics that overdosed this kid with, I think, murder. They charged them with manslaughter or something. They're criminally charging them for a clinical mistake, which is unheard of. It's unprecedented. We don't do this. We don't.
Has
do this.
Has this already gone? Has this already gone to trial?
It's in the process right now. They just announced this, and this was 2 years ago. This case came and went, and nobody said anything, and then kind of all of the political stuff came up, and now it got kind of drug out.
Gotcha.
I think they fired the lead medic after this happened, but it's a mess. And that criminal, I could see a civil suit. Civil suits happen all the time, but criminal,
that's absurd.
Yeah.
They're trying to make they're trying to make an example out of them for whatever reason.
And it is and that's the thing is it's a very tragic case, and people made some really bad decisions through that. And that's what sucks, is because it ends up getting overshadowed by, this blanket legislation is just crazy, in my opinion. Having been beaten up in the back of an ambulance by a patient, having seen these patients, having somebody that I know was restrained properly, was not brutalized in any way, shape, or form, die on my cot after this extreme agitated episode, those things stick with you. And then, to have somebody it becomes this political issue, and I just don't see it like that. I think this is going to end up harming a population that is very vulnerable.
Well, and it's taking tools away. That's what it really is. You're taking a tool out of the toolbox that it's not that it's going to be used often. It's not that it's going to be regular employment. It's that it is there for the scenario in which it's needed. And that one time in, 1,000 that it comes up, it's a necessary intervention. And it's unfortunate that, like there were some bad decisions, and that probably led to, bad information being transferred from person to person or whatever. However it happened. And it can happen on, in a scenario that is less severe. It happens all the time. Like even when you go for just a routine medical, you may have one medic do a lazy assessment and pass bad information. And then you walk in and you're like, oh, this is completely different than what I thought it was going to be. That happens often. Is it criminal? No, you just have to be able to adapt and move forward. That's just, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that the rest of the medics in the state are being punished for, this scenario going the way that it did.
Yeah. And like there's a concept called just culture. We operate under it in healthcare. Most good places to work do, where you look at why it happened in a system. Like you look way back. You're not saying this medic did this because they're a bad person. You look at like what led up to this. Was it lack of training? Was it lack of supplies? Lack of understanding? What happened to make this mistake happen? So like there was a nurse at Vanderbilt that patient was going into a CT machine, and he was kind of agitated. So she was going to give him some Versed, which is, your benzodiazepine. It sedates them slightly, but it's pretty mild, all things considered. It makes them feel a little drunk. And instead of Versed, she pushed rocuronium, which is a paralytic, which promptly killed this patient in the CT machine.
Oh, no. Were they able to revive?
Nope.
Nope,
They died because they weren't on any monitoring. They put him in the CT machine, and he was alive, and he came out dead. And it's a horrific death. It's a horrific death because you can perceive everything, but you can't breathe. You can't make yourself breathe because you can't move any of your muscles. So it's like nightmare scenario. But that horrible of a clinical mistake still falls under a just culture. And it looks at system processes and doesn't look at punitive measures. It looks at improvement measures of how can we make sure this never happens again. And that drives healthcare forward. As tragic as that is, so many good things came out of that to make patients safer. And by going into criminal cases, like just culture encourages me to come forward with a mistake I've made.
Mm-hmm.
A criminal case being made against a provider that makes a mistake in good faith, that makes people want to hide their mistakes.
Yeah,
which is not good and doesn't drive the profession.
Right.
I'll give an example. I don't think that my friends would mind me talking about this, and I'll leave their names out of it. But there's a scenario where a good friend of mine who was the FTO in this particular case was training a new medic, and this the trainee was a very knowledgeable individual. But generally speaking, medics have different ways of going about employing different interventions. They were transporting a pediatric patient, and I believe it was like a trauma transfer, something like that, going down to children's or something along those lines. It's really irrelevant. And he drew up fentanyl to administer analgesia, and the FTO verified the dose, said that it was correct, drew up the vial and handed it over. Well, the FTO's method was to draw the entire vial and administer only what was needed. The trainee's method, which this was a lack of communication, was to only draw what was needed and then waste the vial later. There's arguments to be made for both. And so the FTO hands over the entire vial in a syringe. The trainee, after having verbally failed to look because they were going through this verbal confirmation process, and administered the entire vial. And, thank God, ultimately, no harm came upon the patient. And it was a situation that once they realized it, basically what happened was they got to the hospital, and he was like, hey, let's go waste. And one was like, what are you talking about? Let's go waste. We need to pull it from the vial first, and then we'll go waste. He's like, what are you talking about? And then they realized, oh no, big mess up. But we were in a system to where we felt, we worked in a system to where they felt comfortable to come forward and say, hey, look, this is exactly what happened. And we'd like to, work this out. Could they have easily documented their way out of that situation? Yeah, especially since there, nothing ill came upon the patient.
Mm-hmm.
However, we as a system benefited from it because we had then processes in place to where FTOs and trainees had an entire system where we went through how to verify administration of narcotics, and
Sure, it pushed forward.
Exactly. So it's just another example of that mentality. So.
Absolutely. And I think that can be said for anything, as we learn really well from our mistakes, and we as human beings like justice. It feels like injustice that nurse continued to work at Vanderbilt after killing this patient, and like all of that. It feels bad. But that nurse is one of the safest nurses with med admin for the rest of her career. I guarantee it.
Sure.
And I think instead of looking at, getting that justice and making us feel good, looking at what we can actually do to prevent it in the future is, and I think that can be applied to not just healthcare, but anywhere.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Creating a culture where you can speak up if you made a mistake and learn from it and go forward.
I mean, and even outside of medicine and business,
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that I think that people who are employed by an employer, if they don't feel comfortable being open, honest, forthcoming, like why would they ever be motivated to be honest about a mistake when that mistake can ultimately make the company stronger and better, can make that employee stronger and better?
Yeah.
That's a mentality that should be carried just well beyond the medical field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jonathan, part of me hopes that at Live the Creed, if they mispack an order, you come over screaming at them, knife handing them, make them do push-ups and stuff. That happens there, right?
I usually throw things.
Oh yeah, that's
okay,
John.
Perfect.
For sure. Yeah, his vocal fluctuation is about flat.
Yeah, they're always like, you're the most steady person I've ever worked for. Just like you're neither happy nor mad ever. There's something wrong with you. It's because I take ketamine every morning.
The success of Live the Creed, built off drugs.
There you go.
There you go, guys. That's the secret to business.
And with that, we're oh man, that's funny.
Well, I think that's probably pretty good for the medical portion. I just wanted to chat with you a little bit. You said you're going on a hunt. We just got back from our elk hunt. Sounds like based on the timing, you're going for a rifle hunt.
Yep. Did you get anything when you went?
Well,
No.
we went up for archery. Josh and my brother, they both have bows, and they were sick as a dog the day before. They pushed it back a day, and the next day they were like, screw it, we're still going, because the tag was about to close. So we went up and hunted sick, but we did get in pretty close to a bull, and that was a cool opportunity, but we didn't take one home.
Yeah, we were in elk every day. We dubbed it Murphy's Hunt. We think we chronicled the whole thing on a podcast. So if you want to go hear all the nitty gritties, but yeah, it was bad. We both woke up with some sort of strep-like bacterial infection,
Yep.
and we're just both of us are just in bed being little weenies, and so we delayed it, and then we were in elk the first night. We had Chris had I think he said it was a 5x6. It was only exposed for just a little bit, but
Yeah.
broadside at about 55, but it kind of surprised him. So he wasn't set up, he wasn't drawn, so he wasn't ready to let one fly. But that was pretty cool. And then we basically got into where they were bedded. The next morning, we called a bull in, and he closed a pretty decent distance. He hung up, and then we never got visual on him. So that just happens. So
Yeah, for being sick, it was actually a pretty cool hunt. But yeah, is this going to be your first elk hunt?
No, so the story behind the hunt, there's a story behind everything. I would hunt a lot with my grandfather when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
Into adulthood, and he took me elk hunting. We went through this outfitter when I first graduated high school as hey, this is your graduation present and stuff. So he took me out, had a big part to play with growing up and all of that. And he unfortunately passed away this last year. So my uncle and I were feeling kind of bad. And we were well, this is kind of our way to go out. We're doing the same outfitter, same place, and kind of a memorial hunt for him.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Showing we're still going to do it even though he's not here.
Right.
Very cool.
So we're going up to Bob Marshall Wilderness out in Montana.
Yeah. That's going to be
Awesome.
beautiful.
You guys driving?
We're flying. Well, I'm flying into Spokane on Friday, and then we're doing a float trip to do some fly fishing. And then we're gonna go out and we're gonna do 2 weeks in the backcountry at a drop camp. So should be fun.
Awesome.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're gonna drop you in with horses, like bring the camp in.
Yep, horses. Got your heated tent with a little stove.
Yeah,
in
little
it,
stove,
all,
yep.
all of that, and
Wait, you can't bribe the pilots, your buddy pilots, to drop you in, or what?
I tried, and Susie was like, "No, like if I go into labor, like you have to figure out how to get to me." So I was like talking to our pilots, and it's like, "Okay, what would it take? Do you have friends? Who owns a helicopter?" And no, nobody can do it.
You know who's up there is Big Bear Air. I think that's the name. They're like a search and rescue. It was like a philanthropist guy who he's like a millionaire or billionaire, and he had a buddy who needed rescued by search and rescue, and for whatever reason his buddy survived but wasn't able to get like flighted out, and so he started up this 2 Bear Air out of Montana, and they fly search and rescue missions all over that
They just
area
like supplement the system out there.
Yeah, I mean, he like pays for a full-time helo and crew to be on call
That's so
24/7.
There you go.
So you could call them.
I'd be like, "Hey man, I'll make a YouTube video about
I'm like,
you."
that's exactly it. Like, just gotta flex the influencer skills, right?
Well, that sounds like an awesome trip.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I just dropped like $1,000 in first flight shit. So
there you go.
Speaking of gear,
Yeah.
Speaking of gear, hunting is an expensive hobby.
I think they're out of Montana now. They used to be out of Ketchum, Idaho. I'm not sure if
Oh, they're
there's-
not. I thought they were still up there.
That shop, that storefront is still there, but Chris and I drove by and it looked like there wasn't anything in it. So I don't know if they moved, but I'm pretty sure Meat Eater's based out of Montana, and Meat Eater owns First Light now. So.
Oh, okay. Maybe he consolidated them all.
Yeah, I don't know. They may still be out of Ketchum. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So. But it looked like that storefront was. I don't know if it's a storefront or office buildings, but it looked like it was.
Yeah.
It was either they were all out hunting and they just left it a mess, or things were getting moved around. I mean, the former very well may be true. So no, that's cool.
That's awesome.
That's super cool. Well, if you ever find your way down Idaho way, make sure you stop by. We'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love to have you in house here.
Mhm.
yeah, I would like to start touring around and talking with some partners and doing some in-person videos and stuff.
Yeah.
There's some nuance you guys can share about your product that I can't.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah, that would
absolutely.
be awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking
Wait,
the
I
time.
got a final question.
Oh, all right.
What happens if the pilot dies mid-flight? Are you guys trained to fly?
So,
What a terrible question.
No, that's not a
I've
terrible
watched
question.
a YouTube video. Before I got into flights, I went to this conference, and this flight crew was giving a talk about this traumatic experience they had. Their pilot, like they picked up the stroke patient from this ambulance, and they were flying to the hospital, and their pilot stroked out, like mid-flight. Just
See?
like,
Wow.
like,
It happens.
and they didn't know, like we're single pilot VFR aircraft, so you don't
Okay.
have somebody else. So they didn't even know anything went wrong. They just were like, "Why are we in a left-handed downward orbit?" And they were just like, their helicopter was just like this, and they're like, Frank, and they no answers, so they like crawled up into the cockpit, and yeah, he's like
Oh my gosh.
That's-
in the front seat, and he's
terrible.
like kind of conscious. His hands are still on the control. So the medic, they were in an A-Star, so the medic gets out of his belts and like crawls up on the cot. So he's not seatbelted at all when they're about to freaking crash,
Oh my gosh.
and he's like slapping the pilot in the face, like, "Frank,
Yeah,
you
that
have
helps.
to put this helicopter on the ground." He's on top of the patient, like he is crawling on top of this stroke patient, trying
Well, yeah,
to
I
get
mean,
to the
at
pilot.
a certain point, you're
wow.
like, look, we're either all gonna die or I'm gonna step on your face.
And they were getting closer to the ground, and he kept on like, "Hey Frank, put it down there. Put it down right there. Like, that's a good spot. Put it down there. Put it down there." And finally, like the pilot was able to get, like, maybe it was muscle memory, maybe it was like something got through, but he was able to do a rough landing in this field and didn't
Wow.
crash.
That's incredible.
And the
So
crew killed the engine and everything, and yeah, they were all okay.
So you guys don't go through like some level of flight training.
No, we like the pilots all tell you, like, we all look for weather conditions, and I know that there's a collective, and I know that there's all of these other things, but like
A collective. You're gonna have to walk.
Okay.
What's a collective?
So
Yeah.
helicopter, you got your joystick, and that
Okay.
controls the attitude of the helicopter. So left, right, forward, back, and
Okay.
that's
So
the joystick.
three axes of maneuverability. And okay.
Yep. And then you have your foot pedals, which your foot pedals rotate the helicopter. They adjust the pitch of the tail rotor. And the tail rotor is what keeps you from spinning out of control. And it also makes you pivot.
Okay.
And then you have the collective, which is both the throttle, so how fast the blades are turning. And as you pull it up, it changes the pitch of the blade. So that's your up-down
elevation.
movement.
Okay.
Incredibly complex aircraft to fly.
Yeah. I
Absolutely.
mean, like, they don't make any sense. Like they don't seem like they should.
Physically,
be
they shouldn't be flying. I flew one time for like as a training thing, and that was like in the air. Like in the air, those things are somewhat more manageable. But like he put it down and gave me an opportunity to try to hover it and keep all those controls. He did it. He reset it me like 6 times. He'd be like back to neutral, and then they call it stirring the pot. Like you go left a little bit, so you bring the joystick to the right, and then your nose starts to turn, so you push a pedal, and then within like 5 seconds, you're like, where? He's like, taking back control.
Yeah, so we have crash survival training.
Okay.
We all carry a survival kit in our ankles for when we do crash in the mountains.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, there are some things you think about periodically.
Yeah, I would assume, like, I guess I would just assume that to be on a flight crew, you would at least have to have a basic understanding as to how to manipulate the aircraft should the worst happen.
And you can't do it because there's no dual set of controls. So, like, I would have to crawl over a wall barrier, get into the pilot's lap, and sit there and try to override the pilot's whatever they're doing. Like, and I couldn't drag them out. Like, it's too small of a space. I can't get them out of the cockpit.
Just open the door and let them fly, baby.
Right? It's like, we're good.
You're talking numbers here, man. 75% survival is better than 0.
Yeah, it's not a safe job, and I didn't realize how not of a safe job it was until I got into it. And I've had a couple landings in a couple situations where I've been white knuckled on the door and my partner and stuff, where I've just been like, fuck, like this is it.
All right, story time. Come on, let's go.
So it was actually the that one with the hiker with the STEMI.
Yeah.
We were going down these gusty winds. We were at 12,000 feet of elevation, so you lose the ability to manipulate the aircraft.
Yeah,
I was going to say, because at a certain elevation, I mean, you require air to push against. Right?
Yeah.
So
it was like we had already dumped all of the shit off this helicopter before to get people up there with a cardiac monitor and a drug bag. And we were like, we had everything off this helicopter we could. And we're like up there and we're coming down for this like landing, and the helicopter's like doing this. And we've got 2 SAR guys that aren't on comms and have never been in a helicopter before. They're just like, no, they're like, this is cool. Like, this is fine. Like, I'm sure these guys would look scared if things were bad. And the pilot, meanwhile, is in the mic going, fuck, 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 fuck. I'm going, I'm like sitting there like, he's like, yeah, clear skids left. So I'm like, all right. So I open the door and I'm looking down and I'm like, yeah, skids are clear left, man. You can bring it down on this side, but we don't have our nurse. We've got 2 SAR guys, so they can't clear the skids on the right. So he's like, all right, I think we're fine. He starts putting it down. He sets it down. You feel the right skids, and you're like, I know what's coming. The helicopter goes,
oh no.
And luckily he pulled collective, and we fly back down to this lower elevation to start dropping people off so we could attempt the landing a second time. And
was it just on a cliff or what?
He was on like some boulders on the right side, and it just caught those skids and pushed it to the side. And you know, with a gyroscope, when you have a gyroscope going and you like twist it, where it like doesn't go, and then it's like, it's the same thing that a helicopter will do. So once you get to a certain pitch, your helicopter will just roll itself, and you'll do bad things. So we flew back down.
We were inverted.
We flew back down, and we're like coming in for this landing, and this tailwind caught him. And they operate a lot like an airplane, where if you're going into the wind, you've got a lot more lift. But if you're going with the wind, you lose lift. And you're already power limited at elevation.
Okay.
So we hit this wind hit us, and it flipped the helicopter, and the wind so we just kind of lost altitude coming in for a landing, and he had to pull a crazy amount of power with the collective. Put it down. He's a super experienced pilot. Like, it was fine. Everything was fine, but holy crap, it was scary.
But
You were on the ground. It was like, it's fine now. It wasn't fine a minute ago.
all I am thinking is like, there was a day where I was by myself on an ambulance as a brand new medic. And I went out on a call by myself. And I'm like, what if that pilot, this is his first day? Like, that's all I'm thinking. I'm like, because at a certain point,
Right.
like, you know, they give you your wings and they say, fly, bitch.
Luckily, all of our pilots require 3,000 flight hours before they can even apply to be part of our flight program.
Yeah, I was going to
Okay.
say, a lot of those
They're-
flight medics or flight pilots are like super experienced in Montrose, Colorado. The pilots that
I
flew
mean,
from our
I would
hospital.
imagine being in the Rockies.
They were the dude who flew out of Montrose was he flew in Nepal rescuing people off of Mount Everest.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
They're all like, I've got all the faith in the world in them, and we have this thing. It's like 3 to go, 1 to say no. So like at any point, if I'm like, no, we're fucking done, like this is scary, everybody says okay, and it's no questions asked, and you return to base and you abort the mission, no matter
Really?
what it is.
Okay.
So like you're there, but at the same time, it's like you have to have some faith in your pilots. So like if the pilot's like, yeah, I can do this, it's like, okay, like I'm scared, but if you say we can do it, like let's get it. Like
Yeah.
I don't see anything that's blatantly unsafe, so you know.
He's like, you're just not experienced enough to see how unsafe this is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's, you just have to, you know, live blissfully in
Just
that,
like the
in that
SAR
level
guys.
of ignorance. Yeah.
Look.
There was
I mean-
there was a time in 2008 that flying in a HEMS aircraft was more dangerous than being in Iraq.
Wow. That's pretty wild.
I mean, different aircraft.
Different aircraft, and the military had all of the terrain avoidance systems and night vision goggles.
Yeah.
So you couldn't get it. So people were just
Wait,
flying blind at night.
Y'all don't have
Oh, wow.
nods?
We do have nods now.
Oh,
but they
okay.
didn't. In 2008, people were just like, it wasn't you know, the pilots passing out. It wasn't the helicopter failing. It was literally aircraft flying into the side of hills.
Yeah.
Wow.
In like dark conditions. Yeah.
Yep.
Early morning or dusk.
And you mentioned VFR. What is VFR? I've heard that term before, but I don't know what
Visual flight rules, as opposed to IFR, which is instrument flight rules. So like we
Oh,
can't fly
okay.
into a cloud, is what that means.
it is. Got it.
we-
So you have to have visual, like, confirmation of wherever you guys are going.
Yeah. So some like out in like the Midwest and places that aren't as hilly, that aren't as icy,
Uh-huh.
you can have IFR aircraft that they just file an IFR flight plan, and then they'll go into clouds and they'll land wherever they are. But those aircraft, they have to be dual engine aircraft. The pilots have to have extra training. There's a lot that goes into it, and in the Rocky Mountains, you just can't.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. With the small bird too, that's the other thing. You know, you probably at a certain point, it's like driving in a pickup versus a Honda Accord. You know, like you probably just feel better being in something bigger and more robust. You guys are in like the Prius of
Yeah, you
helicopters.
got picked up in the Blackhawk. You're probably like, feeling pretty good right now.
Well, I got in and I was like, there's like 9 of us in this Blackhawk right now, and I can stand up and I'm on
Yeah.
the ground and I'm not crowded. And
Yeah,
I don't
you're
even
like-
feel like we're flying. I'm like, this is amazing.
Damn you, PJs, all the room in the world.
Yeah. Damn you, PJs.
That's crazy, man. Well, yeah, that was my one question. I'm like,
All right. Well,
pilot strokes out,
what do you do? And the fact that you actually had a story.
and apparently the answer
with
is
a
you just die.
stroke. Apparently, the answer is you slap a guy who just had a stroke and you tell him to land the bitch.
All medical training goes away. Just smack the guy until he rallies.
That's on my stroke protocol. Slap him in the face, see if
Slap
it
him in the
helps.
face.
If it
There you
doesn't, pray.
That's
Oh,
crazy.
That's nuts. Yeah.
Wow.
Good story to end on.
Yeah, that is a good one.
It is.
Cool. We're gonna have to do this again, Sam. I really enjoyed this. It was fun.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, I
You're
appreciate
great.
you guys having me on.
You're a great guest. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come talk with us.
Yeah, let our listeners know, where can they follow you, where can they find you, where can they listen.
Yeah, so I can be found on YouTube at PrepMedic, or on Instagram, prep_medic. I don't know who at PrepMedic is, but it's not me.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Good to know.
Cool. Do you do a regular podcast, anything like that?
No, I go on with Skinny Medic once in a while on his civilian medical podcast, and then just kind of a guest everywhere else. My wife would kill me if I picked up another hobby.
Right.
Yeah, no, sounds good. Well, we'll send you over the links and everything to this one when it's up. And yeah, that was a great time.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you guys have any questions for us or for Sam, hit him up on his socials. And all of our contact information is going to be in the show notes. So feel free to reach out, and we'll try to answer whatever questions you have for us.
Yep, absolutely. If you've ever slapped a stroking out pilot, please let us know.
Yeah, we want to hear that story. All right. Thanks, Sam.
All right.
Thanks.